I didn't move into the crumbling brick edifice of the Blackwood Arms looking for a life-altering event. I came here for the cheap rent and the thick walls, a fortress of solitude where I could draw my graphic novels in peace, surrounded by the comforting, anonymous hum of other people's lives. My life was a meticulously curated collection of quiet routines. Morning coffee, 10 hours of drawing, microwave dinner, sleep. A loop. A safe, predictable, and profoundly lonely loop. And then there was him, Marcus. He lived 2 doors down. Unit 3B. My unit was 3D. The space between us was only about 40 feet of worn floral carpet, but it felt like a continent. He was not a quiet man. His boots were heavy on the floorboards. His music, always some kind of gritty, angry rock, bled through the walls on his days off. His voice, when he spoke to someone on the phone in the hallway, was a low rumble that vibrated in my teeth. He was a firefighter. Of course he was. He was built like he was carved from the same solid oak as the ancient doors in our building, all broad shoulders and thick arms. I saw him sometimes coming or going. He'd nod, a quick, dismissive jerk of his chin. I'd duck my head and scurry inside. The sheer, unapologetic space he took up in the world was intimidating. He was a declaration. I was a footnote. My observation of him was a secret hobby, a shameful little indulgence. From my window, I could see the parking lot. I knew the sound of his pickup truck, a guttural roar that announced his presence. I saw him unloading groceries, a case of beer balanced on one shoulder. I saw him leaning against the truck bed, talking to another firefighter, laughing a deep, genuine laugh that I never heard directed at anything in the building. He seemed to belong to a world of action, of physicality, and easy camaraderie, a world from which I was completely, irrevocably barred. He was, I assumed, aggressively straight. Everything about him screamed it, from the truck to the music to the way he moved, a kind of casual confidence that seemed exclusively male and exclusively heterosexual. In my head, he was the kind of man who used words like the ones I'd been tormented with in high school. He was the handsome, popular athlete who would never see the quiet, skinny artist in the corner. Except now, we were adults, and he was the brave firefighter, and I was still the quiet artist in the corner. The distance between us was a chasm of my own making, dug with the shovels of assumption and fear. I wanted him. It was a stupid, pointless ache, a low-grade fever that never broke. I wanted him with the kind of hopeless, subterranean longing that you nurture in the dark, knowing it can never see the light of day. So I kept to my routine. I drew my heroes with jaws like his and shoulders as broad. I lived my life in grayscale, and I painted him in color in the privacy of my own mind. My world was my apartment, a small, cluttered space that smelled of ink and coffee and loneliness. 2 rooms, a galley kitchen, and a bathroom with a perpetually dripping faucet. It was my shell, my sanctuary, the one place I had absolute control, until the day I lost it. The disruption began with the smell of burning plastic, a sharp, acrid scent that cut through the comforting aroma of my French press. I was at my drawing table, lost in the cross-hatching of cityscape, and for a moment, I dismissed it. Old building, weird smells, but it grew stronger, thicker. It clawed at the back of my throat. Then came the smoke. It wasn't a gentle wisp. It was a thick, gray-black plume, rolling out from my kitchen with an unnatural speed. A monster awakening. My heart, a startled bird, began to beat against the cage of my ribs. Panic, cold, and electric shot through my veins. I had left a pot on the stove. An empty pot. I'd turned on the wrong burner, heating the plastic handle of the pan next to it. A stupid, careless mistake. The smoke alarm, a useless plastic disc I'd always forgotten to test, remained silent. The smoke was a living thing now, consuming the air, stinging my eyes. I scrambled for the front door, my lungs already burning. I twisted the knob, my hands slick with sweat. It wouldn't budge. The old wood had swelled in the summer humidity, a common problem, but now it was a death sentence. I threw my shoulder against it. Once. Twice. The frame groaned, but held fast. The smoke was a suffocating blanket. My vision swam. The world narrowed to a gray tunnel. This is it. This is how it ends. A stupid, lonely death in a cheap apartment because of a faulty stove and a swollen door. Then a sound from the other side. A deep, booming voice. "Lau, are you in there?" "Marcus." I tried to answer, but my throat was full of poison. I coughed a ragged, desperate sound. I hammered a fist against the wood. "Stand back," he roared. There was a splintering crash. The sound of an earthquake. The door didn't just open. It exploded inward, ripped from its hinges. And he was there, framed in the doorway like some avenging angel, a fire extinguisher in one hand. He was just in jeans and a t-shirt, but in that moment, he was in full uniform. My hero. He didn't hesitate. He charged past me into the smoke-filled kitchen. I heard the sharp hiss of the extinguisher. I stumbled into the hallway, collapsing against the opposite wall, dragging in ragged gulps of clean, beautiful air. My lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. A moment later, he was back, his face smudged with soot, his eyes wild. He dropped the extinguisher and was at my side in 2 long strides. "Are you okay? Did you breathe much of that in?" I could only nod, still coughing, my eyes streaming. "Let me see." His voice was different now. Not the hallway rumble, but something else. Softer, tense with concern. He knelt in front of me, his proximity a sudden, overwhelming shock to my system. The world, which had been gray and blurry, snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the dark smudge of soot along his jawline. A small, faded scar cut through his left eyebrow, a detail I'd never been close enough to notice. His hands, which I'd only ever seen clenched around a steering wheel or a grocery bag, were calloused and capable. They looked like they could build a house or tear one down. He smelled the smoke and sweat, and something else, something uniquely him. Something clean and masculine that cut through the lingering stench of burned plastic. He was so close. Too close. My entire body was a live wire. "Breathe for me," he commanded, his voice gentle but firm. Deep breaths. "Come on," I tried. I sucked in a shaky breath, and it ended in another racking cough. And then he touched me. His hand came up, large and warm, and settled on my chest, right over my frantic heart. The touch was meant to be clinical, I knew that. A firefighter assessing a victim. But it felt like a brand. Heat radiated from his palm, through the thin fabric of my shirt, and straight into my soul. It was an earthquake in miniature, a tectonic shift happening right there in the dingy hallway of the Blackwood Arms. My heart, already hammering from the smoke and fear, kicked into an impossible, frantic rhythm beneath his hand. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. He can feel that. He can feel how insane you're being. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of hazel, were fixed on my face, searching. He seemed to feel the change in me, the sudden tension. His brow furrowed. "Just relax. You're okay. I've got you," but I couldn't relax. The world had tilted on its axis. He was kneeling in front of me, his hand on my chest, looking at me with an intensity that stripped me bare. The power dynamic, the one that had always existed between us, him the confident man of action, me the skittish observer, was gone. In its place was something new and terrifying. He was the rescuer, yes, but I was the one whose apartment was ruined, whose life had been saved by him. I was indebted. I was vulnerable. He shifted his weight, and his other hand came up to cup my chin, tilting my face towards the weak hallway light. His thumb brushed against my jaw. It was a fleeting, professional touch, meant to check my pupils or my coloring, but my skin burned where he made contact. My breath hitched. "Your pupils are a little dilated," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that traveled from his fingers into my bones. "But you seem okay. We should probably get you checked out anyway." I finally found my voice, a hoarse whisper. "No, I'm fine. Thank you, thank you." The most inadequate words in the English language. You kicked down my door. You ran into a cloud of toxic smoke. You saved my life. Thank you. It was pathetic. He didn't seem to notice. He was still looking at me, his gaze unwavering. And then his eyes dropped. Just for a second. They dropped from my eyes to my mouth. It was a flicker, a barely perceptible movement. But I saw it. I felt it like a physical blow. The air crackled. The space between us became charged, thick with a new kind of tension that had nothing to do with smoke and everything to do with the sudden, terrifying realization that he was seeing me. Not as a neighbor, not as a victim, but as something else. He pulled his hands back as if he'd been burned, and the loss of contact was a physical ache. He stood up, running a hand through his short, dark hair. He looked away, down the hall, anywhere but at me. "Your place is going to be a mess," he said, his voice back to its usual gruffness. "Smoke damages a bitch. You can't stay there tonight." The reality of the situation crashed back in. My apartment, my sanctuary, violated, filled with chemical dust and the ghost of a fire. I had nowhere to go. My parents lived 3 states away. My few friends were scattered across the city. "I'll find a hotel," I stammered, pushing myself up the wall. My legs felt like jelly. He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was unreadable. It was a mix of pity and something else. Something I couldn't name. "Don't be an idiot. They're all booked up. There's a convention in town. My spare room is just a storage closet, but the couch is comfortable enough. You can stay with me." The offer hung in the air between us. An impossibility. A dream and a nightmare rolled into one. Me, in his apartment. The thought sent another jolt of panic, mingled with a dizzying, treacherous hope, through my system. "I couldn't," I said, the words automatic. A reflex of self-preservation. "I just kicked your door in, man," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It transformed his entire face. "I think I owe you a couch for the night. Come on." He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned and walked the 20 feet to his own door, Unit 3B, leaving it open for me to follow. He was taking for granted that I would. And he was right. I was adrift, and he was the only shore in sight. I took a shaky breath and followed him into the lion's den. His apartment was the negative image of mine. Where mine was cluttered with books and art supplies, his was sparse, almost monastic. A large, comfortable-looking leather couch dominated the living room. A simple wooden coffee table. A television against one wall. It was clean. Impersonally so. It didn't look like anyone actually lived here. It was a place someone came to sleep between shifts. It was lonely. That thought surprised me. I had always imagined his life as full, vibrant, loud. But this space was quiet. It held a silence that was deeper than the one in my own apartment. My silence was chosen, a shield. This felt like a void. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said, pointing. "You should wash your face. Get the soot off." He was already in his own small kitchen, pulling 2 beers from the fridge. He moved with an easy, contained grace, a stark contrast to my own awkwardness as I stood just inside his doorway, feeling like an intruder. I did as he said, escaping to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale under streaks of gray soot. My eyes were wide, haunted. I looked like a refugee. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it helping to clear my head. When I came back out, he was sitting on the couch, a beer in his hand and one waiting for me on the coffee table. I sat on the opposite end of the couch, a continent of leather between us. I took the beer. My hands were still shaking. "So," he started, his voice quiet. "You're an artist?" He gestured vaguely in the direction of my ruined apartment. "Saw some of your stuff. The frames were on the floor." "It's really good." My throat tightened. I do graphic novels." He took a long swallow of his beer. "Never would have guessed." I didn't know what to say to that. "Would you have guessed that I sit in my apartment and catalog your every move like stalker?" I took a sip of beer. It tasted like metal and salvation. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. It wasn't the comfortable silence of friends. It was the tense, humming silence of 2 strangers who had just been through a trauma together and had no idea what to do next. All the assumptions I had made about him felt foolish now. He hadn't used a single slur. He hadn't sneered. He had saved my life and offered me his home. "Why'd you do it?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Do what? Put out the fire?" "No, I mean, yes, that, but why for me? We don't know each other. You barely look at me in the hall." He stared into his bottle for a long moment. He rotated it slowly, watching the label. I'm a firefighter, Leo. It's what I do. And I do see my heart did that stupid fluttering thing again. I see you coming and going, he continued, his voice low, almost a confession. You're always carrying that big portfolio case. You always look focused, like you're in your own world. He finally looked up, and his hazel eyes met mine across the expanse of the couch. I wasn't ignoring you. I just figured you wanted to be left alone. The irony was a punch to the gut. The distance I had perceived as his disdain was just him respecting the very solitude I had cultivated. He thought I was the one keeping him at a distance. Oh, I said softly. It was all I could manage. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. The movement closed the space between us by half. My breath caught in my chest. Look, man, tonight was. It was a lot. When I saw that smoke coming from under your door, my heart just dropped. I don't know why. It just did. He was being vulnerable. This man I had painted as an unfeeling monolith of masculinity was laying a piece of his soul on the coffee table between us. He was admitting fear. For me. And in that moment, the last of my carefully constructed walls crumbled to dust. The years of longing, of silent observation, of hopeless pining, it all coalesced into a single, terrifying point of honesty. I thought you hated me, I whispered. The confession felt like ripping off a bandage. His head snapped up. His eyes widened in genuine shock. Hated you? Why in the world would I hate you? I don't know, I said, my voice trembling. Because I'm quiet, different. Because I'm... The word was caught in my throat, a fishhook of fear. Gay. Because I'm gay. But I couldn't say it. Not yet. He seemed to understand what I wasn't saying. A flicker of something, recognition, comprehension, passed through his eyes. He didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He just held my gaze. I don't hate you, Leo, he said, his voice so soft it was almost inaudible over the hum of the refrigerator. Not even a little bit. He didn't move away. In fact, he leaned in just an inch. The air grew thick, electric. I could feel the heat coming off his body. I could smell the beer on his breath. The entire universe had shrunk to the space between us on this couch. My gaze, of its own volition, dropped to his mouth, the same way as it dropped to mine in the hallway. I saw the slight part of his lips, the way the light caught on them. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was about to do something incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe we met in the middle. But suddenly, the remaining distance was gone. His lips were on mine. It wasn't a hard, demanding kiss. It was hesitant, questioning. His lips were soft, warm, and they tasted faintly of beer and smoke. It was a kiss that asked a million questions. Is this okay? Do you want this? What is this? His hand came up, not to my chest this time, but to my neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin just below my ear. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down my spine. I responded without thinking. My own fear-frozen body finally moved, my hand coming up to rest on his arm. I could feel the hard muscle beneath his t-shirt. I kissed him back, pouring all the years of silent longing, all the secret observations, all the hopeless, aching want into that single, gentle pressure. It was a confession more potent than any words I could have spoken. He deepened the kiss, a soft groan rumbling in his chest. It was a sound of surrender, of acceptance. He wasn't disgusted. He wasn't angry. He was here, with me, kissing me. We broke apart slowly, both of us breathing heavily. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. His hand was still on my neck, his thumb a warm, steady anchor in the spinning chaos of my world. Okay, he breathed out. Just that one word. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an acknowledgement, a beginning. I woke with a gasp. The morning light was a pale, gray knife, cutting through the blinds of an unfamiliar window. For a disoriented second, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The fire, the door, the hallway, the couch, the kiss. I was on Marcus's couch. A thick wool blanket was tucked around me, a kindness I didn't remember from the night before. The apartment was silent, utterly, completely silent. A cold dread, familiar and suffocating, began to creep up my spine. I sat up, my heart starting a low, anxious thrum against my ribs. The living room was empty. A single coffee mug, stained with the dregs of black coffee, sat on the kitchen counter. His keys were gone from the small bowl by the door. His truck, I knew without looking, would be gone from its spot in the parking lot. He was gone. No note, no word, just an empty apartment and the ghost of his presence. The spiral started instantly, a vortex of shame and regret pulling me under. He regrets it. Of course he regrets it. He was running on adrenaline. Pity. Curiosity. It was a mistake. A drunken, post-traumatic mistake. My face burned with humiliation. I had poured years of pent-up feelings into that kiss. I had been so transparent, so pathetically grateful and needy. And he, in a moment of weakness or confusion, had responded. Now, in the cold, rational light of day, he had seen what he'd done and he had fled. He was probably at some diner with his firefighter buddies right now, laughing about the weird, skinny artist down the hall. Or worse, he was disgusted with himself. Disgusted with me. The intimacy of the night before felt like a violation now. I felt sick to my stomach. I had to get out. I couldn't be here when he came back, couldn't face the awkward, pitying look in his eyes. I folded the blanket with meticulous, trembling hands, placing it squarely in the center of the couch. I looked around the silent, lonely apartment, and it no longer felt like a potential sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene. I grabbed my phone and my wallet, the only things I'd had on me, and slipped out the door, closing it softly behind me. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hall. I spent the next 2 days in a sterile, beige hotel room across town. My insurance company was dealing with the apartment. Contractors were assessing the damage. I should have felt relieved, safe. Instead, I felt hollowed out. My old solitude, the one I had so carefully curated, had returned. But it was different now. It was tainted. Before, it had been a quiet room of my own choosing. Now, it was a prison cell, and the walls were papered with the memory of his absence. Every ping of my phone sent a jolt of pathetic hope through me. Every time, it was my insurance agent or a text from a friend who'd heard about the fire. Nothing from him. The silence was an answer. A loud, screaming confirmation of all my worst fears. He was erasing me. He was pretending it never happened. The push and pull of it was agonizing. One moment, I would remember the feeling of his hand on my neck, the soft surprise of his lips, and a fragile hope would bloom in my chest. The next, the crushing reality of the silent morning, the empty apartment, would stomp it back into the mud. I had been a fool. I had mistaken a moment of chaos for a moment of connection. On the second night, I was lying on the stiff hotel bed, staring at the textured ceiling, when there was a knock on the door. Not the door to my apartment, but here, my hotel room. My blood ran cold. It was probably just room service with the wrong order. It had to be. The knock came again, firmer this time. Now, it's Marcus. Can you open the door? His voice, muffled through the wood, but unmistakably his. My heart seized in my chest. A wild, chaotic mix of terror and elation flooded me. What did he want? To apologize? To tell me to forget it ever happened? To get his blanket back? I stumbled to the door, my legs unsteady. I looked through the peephole. It was him. He looked awful. He was wearing the same jeans from 2 days ago and a faded gray sweatshirt. There were dark circles under his eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. He looked lost, wrecked. I took a deep breath and opened the door. He stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He was holding a greasy-looking paper bag that smelled of burgers and fries. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. "Hey," I replied, my own voice of strangers. An awkward silence hung between us. He looked past me into the impersonal hotel room. "Can I come in?" I stepped back, holding the door open. He walked in and placed a bag of food on the small desk. He didn't sit down. He just stood in the middle of the room, looking anywhere but at me. "I'm sorry," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I'm so sorry, Leo. The way I left. That was not okay. I'm an asshole." I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. This was not the speech I had prepared myself for. "I didn't run," he continued, finally meeting my eyes. His were filled with a desperate sincerity. "I mean, I did run, but not for the reason you think. My sister, she went into labor 2 months early. My phone was off. I didn't see her calls until I woke up at 5 in the morning. I had to go. I drove straight to the hospital 3 hours away. It's been chaos. The baby's in the NICU. Everything's a mess. He ran a hand over his face, a gesture of pure exhaustion. I should have left a note. I should have called. But my head was gone. And then, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if you'd even want to hear from me. I thought maybe you regretted it. The reversal was so complete, so sudden, that I felt a wave of dizziness. He thought I regretted it. The silence that I had interpreted as his rejection, he had interpreted as mine. We had been trapped in two separate, identical prison cells of our own making. You thought I regretted it? I asked, my voice cracking. Yeah, he said, looking at the floor. I kissed you. Out of nowhere. After your apartment almost burned down. It was messed up. I took advantage, no. I said, the word sharp, forceful. He looked up, surprised. No, you didn't. Marcus, I stopped, my courage failing me. You wanted what? He prompted, his voice gentle. I took a breath. This was it. No more hiding. I wanted that for years. The air left his lungs in a rush. He stared at me, his hazel eyes wide with a dawning, incredulous understanding. 4 years. I nodded, my face burning but my gaze steady. I've been half in love with the grumpy, mysterious firefighter down the hall since the day I moved in. A slow smile spread across his tired face. It was like watching the sun rise. Grumpy? I'm not grumpy, you're a little grumpy. I countered, and a small, watery laugh escaped me. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps. He stopped right in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth of his body. I'm not grumpy, he whispered, his smile softening. I'm just quiet. And I was scared. Scared of what? Of this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Of you. Of the way I felt every time I saw you in the hall. Looking so damn focused and perfect. I've never felt this way about a guy before, Leo. It's new. It's terrifying. And when you kiss me back, it was the most real thing I've felt in a long time. And that scared me more than anything. This was the conversation. The clarifying, terrifying, beautiful conversation that changed everything. All the fear, all the anxiety of the last 2 days, it all melted away, replaced by a fragile, brilliant hope. I was scared too, I admitted. I still am. Good, he said, a real smile touching his lips now. Then we can be scared together. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single key on a plain silver ring. He pressed it into my hand. My fingers closed around the cool metal. My apartment got really empty after you left, he said softly. Don't stay here. Stay with me until your place is fixed. And maybe even after, it wasn't a question. It was an offer, a promise, a tangible act of commitment that spoke louder than any declaration of love. A key, a way in. He was letting me in. Okay, I whispered, my voice thick. Okay, he echoed. And then he kissed me again. There was no hesitation this time. It was a kiss of relief, of reunion. It was a kiss that tasted like cheap burgers and a new beginning. The days that followed felt like learning a new language. We moved my salvageable belongings from my smoke-damaged apartment into his. My easel and art supplies found a home in the corner of his sparse living room, adding a splash of chaotic color to his clean, beige world. My books filled an empty shelf. Slowly, impossibly, his lonely apartment began to look like a home. Our home. The new rhythm of our lives was quiet, but it was a shared quiet. I woke up not to silence, but to the sound of him making coffee in the kitchen. He would leave for his 24-hour shifts, and the apartment would feel empty again, but it was a different kind of empty now. It was the absence of a specific person, a temporary void that I knew would be filled again. It was the quiet of waiting, not the silence of being alone. We learned each other in small, domestic moments. I learned that he hated mushrooms, but loved my terrible, instant ramen creations. He learned that I couldn't sleep without a fan on, even in winter. I would sit and sketch at the kitchen table while he read, the only sounds the scratch of my charcoal on paper and the soft rustle of a turning page. It was a peaceful, easy intimacy I had never imagined possible for myself. One evening, about a week after I'd moved in, he came home from a long shift, looking exhausted. He dropped his bag by the door and just stood there, watching me as I worked on a new panel for my novel. "What?" I asked, a little self-conscious under his gaze. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. His body was a warm, solid weight against my back. "Nothing," he murmured into my hair. I like this. I like coming home to this. To you." My heart did a slow, warm turn in my chest. I like being here to come home to. He was a plot twist I never saw coming. A disruption that had shattered my carefully controlled routine and rebuilt it into something infinitely better. The fire had been terrifying. It had cost me my sanctuary, my belongings, my sense of safety. But it had given me him. It had burned down the walls, both literal and metaphorical, that had kept us apart. I looked back at my old life, at the quiet, lonely man drawing in his fortress of solitude, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He had thought he was safe, but he had only been hiding. He had mistaken predictability for peace. Now, my life was unpredictable. It was sharing a bed with a man who sometimes had nightmares about fires. It was learning to navigate the complexities of his world, of his family who were slowly learning about me. It was frightening and uncertain and messy, and it was wonderful. I had spent a decade building a life that was designed to keep me from getting hurt, to keep me from risking my heart. I thought that was strength. But true bravery, I was learning, wasn't about building walls. It was about having the courage to let someone kick down your door and lead you out of the smoke. It was about accepting a key to a new life, even when you were terrified of what was on the other side. It was about finding a home, not in a place, but in a person, and in the quiet, shared space of our apartment, surrounded by the smell of his coffee and my ink. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was finally, truly home.